Hey guys, and welcome to a new video. As photographers, we all know that light is the most important thing because no light means that no photography. In this video, I'm gonna teach you how to control the camera settings for shooting in low light and to pick the right settings and to get sharp photos like this and this. My name is Dan Almog, and I'm a wildlife photographer, wildlife filmmaker, and a cameraman living in southern Uruguay. Subscribe to my channel, how I explore the amazing world of wildlife and nature. So how do we control our light? Here are three terms that you may know, but you don't know very well how to use them. The first one is the shutter speed. A slow shutter speed will give you more light into your image without losing the image quality, but on the other hand, will do more thing. It will add light, but also will make your photos to look very blurry if the camera is not stabilized. If you're gonna use on a fast shutter speed, so your photos will look sharp and will look blurry, but they will be darker, so you need to use it when you get more light. The second one is the aperture. An open aperture like f2.8 or f2.2 will give you more light into your image, but it will be with a little bit of less your sharpness in your photo, and also only a small part in the image will be in focus and the rest of the image will be out of focus. Now, open apertures, like I said, f2.8 are useful when you want to shoot macro things like a little ant on a leaf, something like that this will make sense to shoot on open aperture, so then you shoot a small subject, but it will not be useful to shoot this when you're shooting a whole person, for example, or a whole elephant in Africa, or even a landscape. When we're shooting bigger stuff or we want all our image to be in focus like on landscape photography, that is the time when we are using on a close aperture which add less light but makes our photo to look more sharp and makes the whole photo in focus, like an aperture of f9 or f10. Those are the apertures that we're using in landscape photography, and we're using more like f5.6 or f6.3 when we want to shoot something like a person or the whole body of the person or a group of persons. These are things that we don't need a super close aperture like f10, but we still we want the whole person to be in focus and to add a little bit of light to it. And the third thing is the ISO. A high ISO, like 3200, will bring to your photos light and it will look a little bit better than a low ISO. But on the other hand, it will make your photo very noisy. Noise is one of the things that people don't like in their photo more than blurry, because on slow shutter speed, it can add to our photo a lot of light without losing the image quality. But if we can put our camera on a tripod and to shoot subjects that are not moving, like indoor when there is not so much light, so this thing can be much more better and we're not losing the image quality. The aperture doesn't make really to lose the image quality, but the ISO does makes the image to lose the quality, because then their photo looks a little bit dirt. If you understand me, sometimes you get to use on a high ISO because sometimes you have problems with light. So ISOs happens when they are also depending on our camera settings, because sometimes the light doesn't make you to use on a super high ISO like 1600, but you're using on a very high shutter speed, so our camera need to pick for you the right ISO settings, and if you will choose the 100th ISO, it will make your photo to look not good and too dark. But at today's generations, ISO is not a big problem, high ISO, because there are many ways to clean up this ISO. First, it's to use a camera with a good dynamic range. Full frame cameras most of the time got better dynamic range and better ISO performance than APS-C cameras because of the large sensor size. So this is a thing to use for shooting in low light, to shoot with a camera that got a large sensor size, like a full frame Canon R5 or the Canon R6. Those are two examples that got an amazing dynamic range and ISO performance. To use also, if you're using Lightroom for edit your photos, so Lightroom got an effect called denoise that works very well. I'm using it all the time when I get the photos who looks very noisy. So if you're editing a little bit and make denoise, it makes you, like you see here, the difference after it. And then you can even shoot on ISO 3200 and make your photo to look sharp. Don't use it too much, so not all the pixels in your photo will go away because you use it too much. Less will make your photo too noisy, and too much of this will make your photo to lose all of the parts and all of their sharpness. So that's why you need to use a little bit for just to not make your photo to look too noisy. Now, this is a warning for you. Don't think that you can go now in low light to shoot on 100 ISO and with a shutter speed of 1/400 of a second, and then you will just raise the exposure and edit and process it, so they make your photo to look better. This will make your photo to look worse. When we're raising the exposure, so we're making the parts when there are ISO to look even worse, because then we're raising all of the light in our photo, and most of the time in your photo, the parts that all of the noise looks very well, it's on the dark parts of the image. If you got now a photo of a person with a white background behind it, but the person wear black clothes, and then you will zoom in, you will see that the noise is more on the person than the background, because the person is black. On the black part of the image, the noise looks more, and on the white part of the image, the noise looks less. That's how the noise looks like in the high ISOs. Okay, so now you learn what each term of the aperture and the ISO and the shutter speed, you learn what each one of them is making to your photos. And now what you need to do is to learn in what type of settings to use in your type of photography. That's because not in each type of photography we're using the same settings. If you're shooting an event photography, so you will not shoot at the same settings that you're choosing for wildlife photography like I do, because in wildlife photography we're most of the time using on high shutter speed for freezing fast action like flying birds, and we're using on the opened aperture as we can for making blurry background and add more light into our image. And what I like to use is auto ISO, so then the camera saves me time, so I will not need to also worry about the ISO. The camera worried for me. This saves me time, because then I can shoot manual with auto ISO. I already say it a lot of time here on this channel that to shoot manual with auto ISO, it's one of the best camera setting that you can use, because it saves you time, worry, and the image quality, because then you don't need to worry about the ISO if you will now pick this amount of shutter speed, but you will think like, okay, so what needs to be the ISO for this amount of shutter speed? The camera choose it. You don't need to worry about it, and this saves you time, like I said. On event photography, which there you are using on a different type of camera settings, there it can be even easier to add more light into your image, because you're filming persons and children's, which there you can tell him to stay still with not moving. You can use a flash, which this is something that you cannot use in wildlife photography. And you can also use a tripod to tell him to stay still and to don't move. And there you can even get sharper photos than wildlife photography if you know the right technique for doing it. Of course, that also to get better result in low light is also depending on your equipment, what kind of equipment you're using. If you are shooting with a full frame camera like 5D Mark IV and this lens like 24 to 70 millimeter f2.8 with a flash on it, and you got also a little tripod for it, you're golden. You got one of the most important thing, you got a big sensor size, which will make you better result in ISO, because then if you're using on high ISO, it will be better than to use on a small sensor size camera. And the second thing that it will make you better is first you got the open aperture f2.8. This 24 to 70 millimeter f2.8 is one of the amazing lens for event photography. This is on the right focal length for it, and you can ask for people to stay still, to even shoot on ISO 100 if the camera chooses like this, because you're putting on your camera on auto ISO. So if the camera chooses for it 100 ISO, it will even make better than to shoot it with high ISO. You ask for the people to stay still. You're putting the camera on flash, so it will add more light into your image. And you got a big sensor size, so you will not need to worry about high ISO, because your camera got better dynamic range than APS-C cameras and better ISO than APS-C cameras. On wildlife photography, it's more hard to get sharp photos in low light, because you can't ask for your subject, if it's the bird or it's a deer or doesn't matter what is it, you can't ask him to stay still and do not move, because the wildlife can do whatever they want to, and if they will see you, they will run away and you can do nothing about it. The trick here is to let the camera choose the ISO. Don't be afraid of it. If you're thinking that the camera will choose too much high ISO, which will ruin your photo because then they will look so noisy, it's actually not the camera fault, it's your fault. The camera is actually doing her work. If the camera see that you're choosing a too high shutter speed and your aperture can be more open, but it's still more closed than what is the maximum opens it, so the camera will choose for you the right ISO for getting the right expose. So one of the good things that you got today on most of the cameras, you can look on the eye cup, and you can see also, of course, your subject in it, but also on the bottom of below the photo, what you're seeing in the eye cup, you can also see your camera setting, the ISO, the shutter speed, and of course the aperture. And because it's ISO on auto, when you're not clicking on it, so it will just look at auto, but when you're coming to look on your photo, the bottom that you're clicking on the photo got two steps. One step is to first click half, and it will make if you're shooting on auto, for example, on totally automatic, you will also see that if you're clicking half on the bottom, if you're clicking on the bottom but not until the end, it will show you the settings. So if you're shooting manual with auto ISO, half click on the bottom and you can see the ISO amount that the camera is choosing for you. If you see that it's too much and you don't want it, so you will need to open more your aperture or make your shutter speed more slow, so to add more light into your image. As slow that the shutter speed will be more slow, the camera will not choose too much ISO, and as slow the aperture will be more open, so the camera will not choose also too much high ISO. Useful. Now, don't make yourself something that's called light snobs. Light snobs are people that going outside only when the light is perfect. Because if now you didn't have the time to go on the perfect light, and the only time that you got is almost after the sun was set, so you got two options: photos that looks noisy or go home. Of course, that what is the best for you is to try to film even with photos that will look noisy, and then if you're editing on Lightroom, which is one of the best softwares for edit your images, you're coming home, you're putting the SD cards in your computer, and you start to process your photos. Your photos need a little bit of process for look good, and then you're putting the denoise. If you know how to use it, you can see here, you're clicking it, and then it will make your photo to look better. There is also something called luminance that you can use it for make your photos to look less noise. Also very useful. And also, always, if you got time to go on the perfect light, I'm not saying that it's not good to go on the perfect light. Actually, it's very good. But if you will go sometimes on purpose on that light, it will make sense, so you can learn a bit how to shoot in low light. Always go to practice a little bit. If you're not shooting wildlife, you're just shooting indoor. So like I said, indoor is more easier because you can ask for your subject to stay still. You can use more slower shutter speed if you are shooting only a photo of your living room or your kitchen, so you can use slower shutter speed on a tripod, and all of your photo will look with a lot of light without losing the image quality. Which means that you also can make all of the photo of your living room in focus and use on an aperture of like f8, f9. Very good and very useful for it. And like I said, don't make yourself a light snobs that go outside only when the light is perfect. Let's do now an exam, so we can see how to control the three terms called the aperture, ISO, and the shutter speed. So we will gonna try with this mini car right here, and I'm gonna show you the result right now. Okay, so now my camera is on a tripod, so I don't need to worry about the shutter speed because my subject, which is the car, is not moving, so I don't need to worry about the shutter speed. And what I'm gonna do is that I will gonna choose a shutter speed of 1/100th of a second, and I'm gonna use the open aperture that this camera got, and I'm gonna put my ISO on auto, so my camera will choose for me the right ISO, and let's see the result. As you can see, only a small part of the image, which is the front of the car, is in focus because I used on a very open aperture, which is f1.4. Okay, so now I will change my setting and I will let you see here. I'm gonna put my aperture now on f10 to make the whole image in focus. And of course, I let my camera on auto ISO to see on what ISO it will pick for me. And let's take the shot. As you can see in this footage, the whole image is very noisy because I use on very high ISO, which was 12,800, and the whole car is in focus because I use on a very close aperture, which was f10. Okay, everybody, that's it. That was the guide about choosing the right settings for low light in your camera. If you like this video, please give me a like and a subscribe. I really try to answer about all of the questions that some of you got in the comments below. Like you saw, it's different settings on each type of photography because we're not using the same settings in wildlife photography. We're not using the settings for event photography on wildlife photography because it will not work very well. Like you saw, wildlife photography is a bit more hard to use it in low light. And that's why it's good in our generation that we got some filters like denoise and Lightroom makes your photo to look less noisy. Anyway, I will see you guys on the next time.